All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We are taking a massive conceptual journey today. We're traversing the space from the absolute quietest, most intimate spiritual night of the year, all the way out to the apocalyptic, literal end of human history. We're looking at how the Islamic tradition understands time, destiny, and the ultimate culmination of the cosmos. So let's dive in. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The Night of Power. 2. Seeking the Hidden Night. 3. Signs of the Hour. 4. The Apocalyptic Impulse. And 5. Modern End-Time Narratives.
Section 1. The Night of Power, the Annual Reset.
So we begin our journey in the final days of the month of Ramadan with the search for one singular, genuinely transformative night that basically resets the human timeline. The tradition calls it Laylatul Qadr, which is often translated as the Night of Power or the Night of Decree. Now, it's described in the Quran as being better than 1,000 months. To put that into perspective, that is roughly 83 years. That's an entire human lifetime packed into one night. But the word Qadr also means predestination or destiny. According to the sources, human lives and honestly the entire cosmos were mapped out in the preserved tablet 50,000 years before the creation of the heavens and the earth. Yet the profound promise of this specific night is that portions of this destiny can actually be altered through sincere, deeply present prayer. What's truly fascinating here is the sheer cosmological scale of what we're talking about. This quote from the Hadith collection of Abu Dawood illustrates that the eternal decree is already written. Laylatul Qadr is understood as the exact moment in the annual cycle when that eternal decree is brought down and made operative in the current year's timeline. It's essentially the moment the universe's parameters for the very next year are set in stone.
Section 2. Seeking the Hidden Night. The physics of proximity.
Now, if the stakes of this night are really that high, how does one actually engage with it? Let's look at the intimate, psychological approach taught by Sufi masters to achieve total proximity to the divine. The tradition highlights a really interesting core tension here. You see, the exact date of Laylatul Qadr is famously hidden somewhere within the final 10 odd nights of Ramadan. The 13th century mystic Ibn Arabi argued that this hiddenness, it isn't an obstacle, it's actually the instruction. The uncertainty separates the strategist from the seeker. The strategist treats the night kind of like a spiritual ATM, right? They want to maximize their yield, resting up on the other nights. But the seeker? The seeker just wants the beloved, sustaining their search across all the nights just to close that distance. The night, the tradition argues, opens only to the seeker. So to become that seeker, the Sufi tradition developed a highly practical 3-step method to achieve hudur, or profound presence, across the really long, fatiguing hours of the night. First, you remove the exits. This means setting strict boundaries against distractions, so no phones, no idle chatter. Second, you sustain your focus. You don't punish yourself when your mind wanders. You just gently and repeatedly return your attention to the divine. And third, you have to be totally honest. That honesty is perfectly captured by Rabia al-Adawiyya. She was this incredible 8th century mystic. She approached the divine completely without that performance layer of seeking a reward or fearing a punishment. The sources really emphasize that bringing whatever is actually true in you, your grief, your doubt, your longing, completely undisguised, well, that's the actual mechanism for connecting with the divine on this night. The crucial point to take away from this is that our human ache is actually a compass. Rumi's famous metaphor of the reed flute, which cries out because it's been cut from its reed bed, shows us that our deep human dissatisfaction is not some sort of malfunction, it's an innate orientation toward the source of peace. Laylatul Qadr is the night when the distance between that hollow reed and its source is at its absolute minimum.
Section 3. Signs of the Hour, when the clock stops.
Okay, we are going to pivot dramatically here. We've looked at the intimate annual resetting of time. Now, we're going to zoom all the way out to the macro level, to Islamic eschatology and what exactly happens when the cosmic clock winds down forever. To do this, we're drawing on a really fascinating academic analysis by Dr. Barbara Stowasser. She neutrally explores the incredibly dense traditions of Islamic eschatology found in the Hadith. And the Hadith provides a vast, highly detailed framework of what to expect as the literal end of the world approaches. The tradition categorizes these warnings into minor and major signs. Now, the canonical list of minor signs act almost like a mirror, reflecting societal decay. They include things like the loss of trust, the widespread use of usury,
and anomalies like the acceleration of time or the building of exceptionally tall buildings, which honestly feels remarkably prescient today. These minor signs describe an era where the social fabric of the community is just fundamentally torn apart.
But notice how this tension builds. Classical texts predict that as these minor anomalies peak, a critical threshold is crossed. The timeline plunges straight from these historical and moral markers into the terrifying final struggle between good and evil.
This initiates the major signs of the hour, and it's intense. It begins with the appearance of the Mahdi, the rightly guided Redeemer, who fills the earth with justice. Then comes the horrifying emergence of the Dajjal, the false Messiah, who seduces the masses with pseudo-miracles. This culminates in the return of Jesus from heaven to lead the believers in the final battle and defeat the Dajjal. Following this, the earth faces total devastation by the hordes of Gog and Magog, cosmic anomalies like the actual sun rising in the west, and finally, the Day of Judgment itself.
Section 4. The Apocalyptic Impulse. Quietism versus Activism. So, how have believers throughout history actively responded to the imminent threat of these terrifying end-time prophecies? Historically, there have been two vastly different responses. On one side, you've got the quietist approach, generally championed by establishment clerics. They use these prophecies to encourage spiritual repentance and patience, basically advocating a wait-and-see attitude. But on the other side, you have the activist approach. These are millenarian groups who use the apocalyptic urgency of the texts to justify radical, militant, and often anti-establishment rebellions, genuinely believing it's their duty to hasten the end. And history provides ample proof of this activist impulse, particularly around round calendar dates or moments of deep societal crisis. For example, in 1884, right at the dawn of the 14th Islamic century, the Sudanese Mahdi established a state. Even more dramatically, exactly at the dawn of the Islamic year 1400, which was late 1979 in the Gregorian calendar, a group of apocalyptic rebels actually occupied the Grand Mosque in Mecca, proclaiming that their leader was the Mahdi. This was a massive, violent event catalyzed entirely by millenarian fervor.
Section 5. Modern End-Time Narratives. The Globalization of Doomsday.
Bringing it into our present day, the globalized world has birthed a highly politicized, entirely new breed of apocalyptic pulp fiction. Dr. Stowasser's research outlines how modern feelings of extremity, political dislocation, and very specific grievances, most notably over the Arab-Israeli conflict, have created a massive, hungry market for new doomsday narratives. People are searching for an explanation for why the world feels so chaotic right now, and this literature provides a ready-made, albeit radical, answer.
Now, this new literature is completely distinct from classical scholarship. It's typically authored by non-clerics and journalists rather than traditional scholars. It's characterized by deeply anti-Western and anti-Semitic themes. It also frequently weaves in entirely unconventional pop culture elements. I mean, we're talking UFOs being flown by the Dajjal out of the Bermuda Triangle. It's wild. It takes a literalist, sensationalist approach, entirely rejecting any modernist or rationalist attempts to interpret the ancient texts symbolically.
One of the most fascinating phenomena here is cross-pollination. The research neutrally notes that some modern Islamic apocalyptic writers are actually borrowing heavily from Christian evangelical end-time narratives, like the Left Behind series. They incorporate these foreign tropes, but they simply reverse the roles, framing the events to assert their own exclusive right to salvation while casting the other side as the ultimate enemy.
The academic analysis concludes by pointing out exactly why this happens. In times of extreme stress, alienation, and perceived vulnerability, these radical, exclusionary texts serve a distinct psychological purpose. They console the anxious and enforce a rigid us versus them mentality. They essentially rally collective anxiety to defend a sense of religious superiority against a seemingly hostile world. Okay, so let's take a breath for a second and just look at the incredible zoom out we've done in this explainer. We started by looking at the inward, peaceful polishing of the human heart on Laylatul Qadr, a deeply personal, intimate search for the divine. And we've ended up looking at the fearful, outward projection of chaos in modern apocalyptic narratives, a globalized search for meaning in times of intense political turmoil. Which leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought to take away from all of this. According to these traditions, a moment is coming for all of us when the veil thins. So when the distance closes, whether that's tonight in the quiet of your room or at the literal end of time, what will your mirror reflect? Are you the strategist or are you the seeker? I really hope this explainer gave you a lot to think about. See you next time.